are copyright,
Yes.
which I have not, and I haven't paid for them. So
Okay.
if you're intending to put them onto a website, then you need to give me a couple of days to replace them with free pictures. Because obviously we shouldn't publish something which is copyrighted to somebody else. You can use something for educational purposes, but you cannot publish it. So
So without further ado, we would like to welcome you all from around the world to this wonderful talk given by Dr. Stephen Vickers.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I am, as has been amply made clear, in no way an expert upon this subject. This is, as I put, an ill thought out rant. I've tried to think around the subject as to how God can allow random suffering, but it's difficult to resist Mrs. Mansour because she is so hardworking, and if she says, "I want you to talk about a topic," you have a go. So I'm trying, very trying on occasion. Okay. Exploring the intersection of faith and resilience. Many people say, how can God allow this? My father, Kenneth, was, I know an American would say an Episcopalian. I don't know what a Canadian would say. Church of Canada, no, Church of England. And he was a transport pilot in the RAF during the Second War and then in the RAF Reserve after that. And when he was in Burma, many of his friends were killed and he kind of lost his faith. Although he always said to me, there has to be a God because you have to assume there's something so clever it made itself. Even later in life with the big bang, he said, well, if you have a big bang, you need space to expand it into. You need matter to you need a set of rules which convert between matter and energy. So he never lost his deism, if you like, but he lost his active Christianity. And his question was, how could God allow this pointless slaughter and cruelty? Well, of course, I think the answer of most religious people of any religion would be, it's a question of obeying the law of God. The reason we have laws of God against pointless slaughter and against nationalism and so on is in order that we do not have this kind of things. So the answer is we're not really pieces on the chessboard. Now, I don't know what you can see. So is the picture on the right obscured by pictures of people on yours or not?
So we see words on the left. The answer is in a green box. And then we see on the right, there is a picture of a snake and a female and then some words.
Okay, right. Yeah, see, for me, I had people in the way. Okay, can anyone tell me what the snake and the female is supposed to suggest?
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the knowledge of good and evil. It's the whole thing of free will. And Abdu'l-Baha puts it this way: an animal is not considered unjust and evil because of its cruelty and injustice, for it is not endowed, as is man, with divine qualities. But if man falls into the same evil condition, it is evidence that he has permitted the divine qualities with which he was endowed to be overcome by his ungodlike attributes. It is this ability to do good or to do bad, to move outside the mere animal pressures, if you like, which makes a human. And Baha'u'llah says, think not that we've revealed unto you a mere code of laws. So bad things happen because we have a degree of free will to a considerable extent. But also there are a few kinds of disasters which are not related to any human cause. So we're not talking about human stupidity, but we're talking about what we call natural disasters. This is a part of Los Angeles on fire. Now, anything I say is my opinion, and I could be wrong. So I'm trying a few possible explanations, but a couple of my explanations might even have a bit of truth in them if we're lucky. Um, I suspect that many religious people claiming to know answers are actually on a leadership bid rather than on a search after truth. This learned gentleman on my left is actually enjoying an all expenses paid trip at the expense of a number of mosques around Britain, telling us that in the eyes of God, missing a scheduled prayer is worse than being a paedophile or drug dealer. What's amazing, therefore, is that he's actually, not only does he understand exactly what God thinks, but he's worked out that God is self-centered and actually cares more about his own being praised than he does about the welfare of drug addicts or little children. And he's actually making money out of it. And a lot of you will not know, I assume, or there may be one or two of you don't know, that actually Julius Caesar, before he became a general and then later considered making himself emperor, although he never actually did, actually served as the chief priest of Rome. We talk about people pontificating, going on, and drawing, pontificating would be things like drawing assumptions from the entrails of a goat or a sheep or a cow. And Julius Caesar was chief priest as a power, really, a step to power before he became a general. And indeed, there are people who've both been, in theory, very religious, certainly religious leaders, and generals at the same time. Pope Julius II, 1503, 1513, for instance. Now, Baha'u'llah says, seek not the shelter of the cleric. Why am I saying this? I'm saying because we don't have clerics in our faith. So it would be nice to say, oh yeah, we all understand absolutely why natural disasters happen and what we should do about it. It's probably a merry jape to pretend we can have all the answers, to sport a silly hat and a pretentious title like Grand Ayatollah or His Divine Grace. There's also some inflation in these kind of titles. If you don't fancy just being a mere Ayatollah, you can study a bit more and become a Grand Ayatollah. Tired of just understanding the universe as a guru? Apparently a guru is someone who understands the universe. If you become a Sat guru, you can actually understand things outside the universe. So, you know, the clerics are not, in most faiths, are not given to humility. And they pretend knowledge of God, which they don't have. And we know that the flower cannot understand the gardener. The trouble is, to play such a part, you have to pretend to take yourself seriously. And in looking at clerics, I found some almost amazing titles. The Patriarch of Alexandria is known to his friends, I don't know if he's got any, as his divine beatitude, the Pope and Patriarch of the great city of Alexandria, Libya, Pentapolis, Ethiopia, all Egypt and all Africa, father of fathers, pastor of pastors, prelate of prelates, the 13th of the apostle, and judge of the universe. So, you know, that's a CV for you. We should have him talk about judging the universe, you know. And that's not the way we do things in the Baha'i faith. We don't give a mere mortal the right to pontificate on the things we don't understand. That means asking someone to assist at a fireside in talking about things beyond our understanding is a bit unfair. All I can do here is to look at the variety of possible silver linings in a cloud of disasters. But in this, what we do have is the writings, which only Abdu'l-Baha can interpret. Now let's look at various natural disasters. I will have forgotten some of them, I'm sure. Some of them are natural alone. Most of them have some human to blame. Let's have a look. I'm going to go through a typology of disasters as I see it. I'm not including things like breaking a cup during the washing up. Famine. Now, famine is pervasive and has been pervasive for many, many years. It's really purely a natural phenomenon, and it's often caused or exacerbated by inconsiderate politics. When the Irish potato crop was blighted in the 1840s, the government in London was too slow to relax the tariffs on imported wheat, hence keeping the price of alternative food too high. And 1 million people died of that famine. What have we learned from the Great Famine? The harmony of religion, science, and economics. This is a bird with three wings. Governments must not put economic theory above human life, as the British government did in that decade. Society must avoid monoculture. So that's a scientific learn. Also, in the long run, we're all dead, as Keynes put it. Adam Smith's invisible hand, yes, everything's cured in the long run, but it's too slow acting because people can starve within a month. The problem here was that if you left it just up to free market, in this case, the potato was for most families, both their food and their source of income, because they sold off surplus potatoes to other people to buy the things that they couldn't make themselves. So that actually, even had the wheat been allowed into Ireland at world prices, people with blighted crops could not have afforded to buy wheat, however expensive or however cheap it was. The government responded then with a policy of food for compulsory road work, but this was also inappropriate. People already weakened make poor manual workers. So what we've learned is that when people are down, they need just a handout. They need assistance. They don't need free market policies. But having said that, something else we've learned, of course, is that tariffs are a stupid idea and nobody in their right mind would advocate them, as we know today. And yet we still have famine in the current period. We've learned all this stuff, but we haven't done anything about it. But if you look where these asterisks are to be found, okay, these lists are the people that appear to have died of hunger. So 7 million died in the famine in Ukraine when Stalin seized all their wheat in 32-33 and sent all their leading peasants to Siberia. 0.8 million died in Indonesia. 3 million died in the West Bengal famine of 1944. Sudan, now what's happening now is 61,000 in the capital alone, many, many more in the countryside. Gaza, possibly 10,000 people have died as a result of famine. I know other people have died as a result of other things, but I'm talking about famine. Quite a lot of people, certainly into the thousands, have died in Iraq and before that in Darfur. In North Korea in the 1990s, 3 million people died of famine. All of these, except for North Korea, where there was a major stupidity component, had a warfare component. The West Bengal and Indonesia famines, for instance, were attempts by the Allies to make sure that they deprived the Japanese of food, and they succeeded in depriving not only the Japanese occupiers, but also the ordinary people of food. When I went to North Korea in 1910, the only time they ever mentioned this famine in the 1990s was to say how wonderful Kim Jong-il, the second in the dynasty, in the Kim dynasty, had been, because he had brought the potato to North Korea and cured the famine. You know, that's amazing, having discovered the potato in the 1990s. And you can imagine, because they have to give credit to the leader for everything, you can imagine all these great men saying, would you like to have a look at this vegetable, great leader, you know, until he finally decided he was bringing it. Why are famine deaths so hard to judge? Look at these numbers. They're vague. Many people die from disruption of food supplies, of overwork while hungry, of the disruption of health services through warfare, and whether say they died absolutely of hunger or not is quite difficult, because also once you get weak, you die of a disease, but still it's the hunger that's brought it on. Now, here's a quotation from the Baha'i International Community, The Struggle Against Hunger, 1985. Although there's been an encouraging decrease in the rate of hunger-related deaths over the past decades, the number of undernourished people in the world has never been as high as present. This is 40 years ago. Studies have shown that hunger remains a basic issue in a majority of the world's countries, with approximately half the world population. It's better than that now, I have to say. 15 million hunger-related deaths yearly in children under 5 illustrates the appalling magnitude of the problem. Since the total food supplies of the planet are adequate to satisfy the nutritional needs of everyone, the human calamity of hunger underlines the necessity of reorientating the economies of food production and distribution in the interest of human welfare. The universal conquest of hunger and the establishment of food security for all the world thus demands that we move towards international human and economic solidarity. Not to do so would be a major handicap in the current struggle against hunger. Abdu'l-Baha describes war. We've had famine, now we've got war. Describes war as the most preventable accident. Does anybody know where and when that happened? Hello?
We're all thinking.
First
Nothing.
World War?
It was in, I think it was in California when
Oh,
somebody who made weaponry said to Abdu'l-Baha, why are you so hung up on war? Many more people die in preventable accidents than die from weapons, die in war. And Abdu'l-Baha said, war is the most preventable accident. In other words, it happens because human affairs are badly organized. And he says that in other places. And you've seen in the tablet to The Hague, 1917, war is destruction. Universal peace is construction. War is death. Peace is life. War is rapacity. Peace is beneficence. War is an appurtenance of the world of nature, while peace is of the foundation of the religion of God. Darkness against light. Destroyer as against everlasting life. Devouring wolf, angels of heaven. Struggle for existence. Cooperation. And the good pleasure of the true one. So he puts these contrasts of awful things that happen from war and the great things that happen from its absence. And yet we still have war, some current conflicts. 29 years there's been a war in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, 5.4 million dead at the moment. I'm sure they don't cover it in the United States very much. I suppose they cover it a bit more in Canada. 500,000 probably dead in the Ukraine war, 400,000 dead in South Sudan, 250 dead in the Syrian civil war, which is probably at an end now, although there are still minor fights between the IS and the Kurds and so on. 150,000 dead in the third Sudan civil war, the one that's going on at the moment. Notice the difference between South Sudan and Sudan because the two countries divided in 2011. 60,000 probably dead in Gaza, Lebanon, and Israel in the past 2 and a bit years. 12,000 in the current Sahel war between Islamists and originally the governments and the French, and now it's generally the governments and the Russians. Cost of war. In the first 2 years, Russia spent 212 billion and Ukraine 159 billion. US has probably spent 183 billion. I don't know if you've noticed, but the current president of the United States is very poor at making accurate statistics. And he claims that the US has spent 300 billion. In fact, so far as I can see it from the BBC, the US provided 83.7 billion pounds worth of weapons, and then various reconstruction and social programs bring the thing up to 183 billion. But as lies and inaccuracies go, he's not far off, not far off from any of the things he says. Europe has spent 95 billion. To give fee-free education to age 18 to all the world's uneducated children would cost an extra 340 billion a year. So actually, what we've all spent in 2 years of Ukraine war would have probably provided 18 months of free education to all the children that are not getting it up to age 18. And Abdu'l Baha's Secret of Divine Civilization, that book, which was written anonymously and published in Iran as to how Iran could become a great modern state, Abdu'l Baha says how to reduce expenditure by governments making agreements to get rid of war. This book, Secret of Divine Civilization, if any of you have not read it, I would respectfully advise you to read it. Not only written in the 1880s, is it amazingly modern and amazingly relevant, but also it has had a profound effect on people's minds, even as late as the 1960s, when the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was not then in power, was raving about the Shah's policy of giving education to 18 to women. He said, "This is not Islam. This is the policy of Abbas Effendi." Why did he say that? Because he'd read it in this book written almost 100 years before. This is a testimony to this book, The Secret of Divine Civilization. Now, some disasters are partly natural and partly human. The floods you see here, we're in Asheville, North Carolina, that's Wisvon, courtesy of the deliciously alliterative Hurricane Hélène. We can pretend that the increase in floods are just random acts of God in insurance parlance, but the intensity and incidence of extreme weather events is increasing as temperatures rise. Now, in the UK, we have a dual problem. We haven't got a lot of land, and a lot of new houses are being built on floodplains that were previously never built on. We've had, in the last 20 years, 3 floods, which have been called once in a 1,000-year floods. They are clearly no longer once in a 1,000-year floods. And the effect has been much greater than it was before, because it's the new houses that are built on these floodplains that particularly get inundated. And what's amazing is that people in the Middle Ages understood where was naturally a marsh and a wet year. So my friends whose house was inundated in Worcestershire live in a village called Sedgebarrow, which basically means marshy plants. And there's a number like that, where these villages have names that tell you that they're prone to flooding, but we modern humans think we're such hot stuff that we're exempt from it. And one of the things we're doing is something which you in Canada have long done, is we are bringing back the beaver. We are not bringing back the North American beaver, we're bringing back the European beaver, which is pretty similar, which mercifully, although we've killed it off over much of Western Europe 600 years ago, was still in existence in Poland, like the bison. The European bison was also still in existence in Poland, and we're bringing back that too, but for a different reason. Another disaster, so-called natural disaster, but actually very often with a human component: desiccation, desertification. And how do I say it's partly human fault? When animals are wealth and status symbol, overstocking of land beyond its capacity may result. If you know, there are certain peoples in East Africa, Maasai, for instance, who drink the blood of cattle. Good thing for this, of course, is it enables you to keep the cows, so you can boast how many hundreds of cattle you've got without actually killing them, but while you're weakening them and giving them and getting protein from them. And eventually they overgraze the land. And if you Google the Tighter Hills destocking scheme, and you can see how this happened in the 1920s. Before most of you arrived, we were talking about Watu Wamiti, the men of the trees, started by British Canadian Richardson Bob Baker, and who was a Baha'i, and he emphasized all the time that desertification could only be cured by establishing new trees. So for Baha'i response to desertification, read Baker's Sahara Conquest, or read Paul Hanley's biography of St. Barb. Now, Paul Hanley is a Canadian. I don't know what state he's from, but he's currently a pioneer in Hawaii. But I would strongly advise you to read his book on St. Barb Baker. Another such problem, which is, this one is definitely human disaster, is overfishing. Where countries share a sea, and you can, if you think of a map of the United Kingdom, of Britain and Western Europe, you can see the North Sea and the Mediterranean are typical seas like that. The Gulf of Mexico, for instance, is only shared between United States, Mexico, and Guatemala, perhaps, Belize. But the North Sea is shared by about 12 countries. The Mediterranean is shared by some 20 countries. And you have to have arrangements which pay due obeisance to 12-mile limits to coastal state sovereignty and to 200 miles exclusive economic zones. You probably have that problem around Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, in that the French have an EEZ and you as Canada have an EEZ. So you must have an agreement about fishing in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. If you didn't have, the fishery would collapse because everybody takes more than their share. Any such arrangement has to look at the biology of the fish, and without this, fisheries collapse. Why is that important? Well, if you take our North Sea, the herring breeding grounds are only 6 square miles just off the coast of Denmark. Each female herring is capable of laying 500,000 eggs a year. But if the Danes wanted, they could hoover up all those adult fish during the breeding season in their own sovereign waters, and they could deprive the North Sea of millions of fish. They don't, because we have an agreement. And so overfishing is generally absolutely a human problem. And much overfishing is robbery. Look at the spelling of war there. It should be W-A-R. Look at Somalia. Fishermen can't fish because of the wars in Somalia, and the foreign fleets take 500 million loonies worth of fish every year, steal it from the Somalian 200-mile exclusive economic zone, which is massive. And those Somali fishermen turn to piracy and ransom tankers. If we as an international community protected the rights of Somalian fishermen in the absence of a decent government in Somalia, this wouldn't happen. Yet another disaster, which is partly our fault, is forest fires, the damage to buildings. Fires are not all bad. The forest fires are natural. Clearings thus created leave room for new plants to become established. Many trees actually have adaptations to make them survive in fire. Giant sequoias, jack pines, eucalyptuses. But when you're going to build suburbs in the forest, have respect for nature and put in fire breaks. Another good thing about a fire, the Great Fire of London in 1666 followed the year of the Great Plague, which killed 75,000 people, which was a very substantial proportion of the city of London. After the Great Fire, all the plague bacilli also perished in the fire. The emergence of new global pandemics is partly the fault of humans. This, of course, is our great friend, the COVID-19. We've all seen it. We've got lots of zoonotic diseases, eating primates. 80% of the meat eaten in Cameroon, for instance, is primates, including chimpanzees and gorillas, animals which are closely related to us. We therefore bring their diseases into our system. Climate change, deforestation, careless work in laboratories, which was probably responsible for the creation of COVID. The nervousness of status-conscious countries to share information. If you look at the death rates announced for different countries, in Tanzania, they only announced about 200 deaths, of whom 7 were members of parliament. In the case of Democratic Republic of Congo, they announced less than 1,000 of only 4 were women, because nobody bothered much about the death of women in such a country. So we know that the death rate was very understated, and the unwillingness to share the data together with lack of detailed records, also childish opposition to vaccines, which seems to be becoming an obsession across the world, is obviously going to make the next pandemic that much worse. I'll remind you, this can only be dealt with treating the Earth as one country. I'll remind you of the Baha'i International Community's booklets Turning Points for All Nations, 1995. Although originally conceived within the context of a threat of military aggression, the principle of collective security, some argue, may now be applied in expansive nature to all threats, which, blah, blah, are actually a result of complex breakdown of present-day global order. Drug trafficking, food security, and the emergence of new global pandemics. That's written in 1995. They go on to tell us that the international community should be looking to combat new global pandemics. But did we do anything? No, we didn't. Hurricanes and typhoons are not largely our fault, but global warming exacerbates them. But we can see them coming. We can put in place socially provided precautions to alleviate loss of life. So, I think I've shown that most disasters have a human causal component, yet some things are in no way our fault. Firstly, there are disasters for which we bear no culpability. We have this sense because of Pompeii that volcanoes are our sworn enemies, but in fact, they did a lot to create our atmosphere, to create our fertile soil. And you'll still notice that people very often move to start planting on newly extinguished volcanoes. Volcanoes still have a major role in creating new land and so on. They're not all bad. Apart from small tremors, which may result from fracking, the earthquake is a disaster without any human culpability. Now, volcanoes and earthquakes can change history. Just look at the way the Indus Valley civilization and the Minoan civilization appear to have disappeared as a result of earthquakes and volcanoes. And the explosion of the Thera, now called Santorini, which put paid to the Minoan civilization, has also been convincingly used to explain the series of plagues in Egypt at Moses' time. And it certainly looks convincing to me. So why? You know, what I've done now is give you a big list of disasters. And now I'm on rockier ground now. Why? Baha'u'llah says in the Hidden Words, Arabic 51, "My calamity is my providence. Outwardly it is fire and vengeance, but inwardly it is light and mercy." Also remember the 7th century story of Layla and Majnun, which Baha'u'llah retells in the 7 Valleys. Majnun hates the watchman who is pursuing him until the watchman leads him to Layla, and from then on he loves Layla. He loves the watchman, and that's perhaps the way we can be with some disasters. They help us. Anybody know why I call the Hidden Words the Hidden Book of Fatima? Any idea?
Because it was revealed to Fatima, remembered that or something, I remember.
Yeah.
And that's then
if you look at Baha'u'llah's tablet to the Shah, he says the Hidden Words is the re-revealing of the Hidden Book of Fatima, which was a book revealed by Muhammad for his daughter, which he said you must keep secret, and at the time of the end it will be re-revealed to all the people. And Baha'u'llah says to the Shah, this Hidden Words is this prophecy come true. All of these disasters cause extensive human suffering. So what? People's faith is tested, and it usually emerges far weaker or far stronger, as did my dad's. The writings tell us that tests can help purify the spirit, strengthen character, and enable service to others. However, it is presumptuous for any of us to pretend that we discern a prior divine motive in anything that happens, disaster or not. I take comfort in these two statements. He doeth what he willeth, and ordaineth what he pleaseth. And I swear by my life, nothing save that which profiteth them can befall my loved ones. To this testifieth the pen of God, the most powerful, the all-glorious, the best beloved. He will never deal unjustly with anyone, neither will he task a soul beyond its power. Suffering and learning help us grow in ways we don't understand. Failure can also combat hubris. Now, of course, looking into the Titanic, there seems to be good evidence that, in fact, the White Star Line sailed it knowing that there was a fire in the coal store. So, in fact, this was a case where it was human negligence and knowing negligence which led to the disaster. But if you look at this YouTube address here, a lady has uploaded a 12-minute video onto YouTube about Abdu'l-Baha's talk several days after the loss of the Titanic. You all know that Abdu'l-Baha was supposed to be traveling on the Titanic. The Americans Baha'is sent him a ticket for the Titanic, but he said no, he wasn't going to go on that boat, and he came on the Cedric instead. You also know that in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Abdu'l-Baha purposefully missed a tram, which then ended up in a crash. So he obviously had prior understanding in some way of these disasters. But what do we learn? What do we learn from those disasters? The important thing is not what we do before the disaster and what we do afterwards. And I would strongly advise you to go to that YouTube video and watch it. Shoghi Effendi gives what we might call a beyond our ken explanation. We don't know this. In every suffering, one can find a meaning and a wisdom, but it is not always easy to find the secret of that wisdom. It is sometimes only when all our suffering has passed that we become aware of its usefulness. What man considers... I'm sorry, madam. Sorry. What man considers to be evil turns out often out to be a cause of infinite blessing. And this is due to his desire to know more than he can. God's wisdom is, however, inscrutable to us all, and it is no use trying to push too far. Sorry, no use pushing too far, trying to discover.
You understand.
I'm really sorry, I didn't catch that. Say it again.
I don't think they understand this. Your sister, your one sister. I don't think she can understand.
I
In
think
every suffering, your pain and the wisdom.
this is Lou from Malaysia. Would you like to say something to Stephen?
Oh, so sorry. I unmute. Oh God, I was
I'll
just
unmute
talking.
you. It's okay. Thank you.
Not at all. Don't worry at all. Sorry, I thought it was me. And it's no use pushing too far to trying to discover that which will always remain a mystery to our mind. So Shoghi Effendi has a lot more humility than that rather foolish imam that's touring Britain at the moment, in realizing that actually God's approach is impossible for us to understand. Okay. When I was first interested in the faith, this is Katabi hearsay, as we say, I was told that Shoghi Effendi had said that there were three things not given to us to understand yet: the balance of free will and determinism, that should be, why the innocent suffer, and I can't for the life remember what the other one was. Now, I can't actually find this written down anywhere, so I'm only telling it to you. I'm not saying that this is true. I'm saying that I was told by a fairly knowledgeable Baha'i at the time that Shoghi Effendi had said this thing. It could have been something he had said when this guy was on pilgrimage, because I'm an old man, and that so I was mixing with people that had met Shoghi Effendi. But I've never been able to find this anywhere. But if it's true, it addresses the question that actually, at the moment, we can't know the balance between free will and determinism, and we can't know why the innocent suffer. But more than anything, problems teach us to work together. Look how many of the disasters that we call natural disasters actually have a major human component. We've established that. And I'll draw to your attention a paragraph from Summoning Our Common Will, a Baha'i contribution to the UN Global Development Agenda, 2015. Another area ripe for investigation is the underlying causes of seemingly intractable challenges, in particular the complex interplay between material aspects and more intangible factors, such as beliefs, values, norms, and ethics. Social ills often stem as much from distortions of relationships and values as from a lack of resources. Agenda 2030, that's the agenda to put in place all these social development goals, for example, asserts that eradicating poverty in all its forms is the greatest global challenge. But this challenge itself stems from an even more fundamental issue, namely those personal and collective values that allow poverty to exist in a world with sufficient resources for all. In this light, poverty reflects not simply a scarcity of material resources, but a deficiency in the way human beings perceive, relate to, and value one another. In other words, we could, if we had a will to do it, we could help those who are poor become comfortably off, but we choose not to do it because of our value system. I don't know if any of you have ever studied in any way or seen any program about primates, kind of monkeys that live in a hot spring area of Japan. Now, what happens there is that these hot springs produce pools which are big enough for the entire monkey troop to live in. But what happens is about 3 or 4 big bully males throw all the other males out and make them shiver in the snow, but they allow all the women and children to come into the pools with them. And in a way, humans are a bit like that. We could include everybody, but we choose not to because it makes us feel good, superior in some way. Think of the example of the Baha'is of Tanna, unity and action. Twice, now this is an island that until about 40 years ago worshipped Prince Philip. This now has a Baha'i house of worship. Twice the island was, many things were flattened by a hurricane. And twice the Baha'is took a leading role in rebuilding, particularly the teenagers. And they've established plant nurseries, tree nurseries. They've established rebuilding of the houses, which is quite easy because they're made of wood and palms. But the Universal House of Justice refers to this when they announced the actual opening of the House of Worship in Tanna. This is truly a moment to give thanks that the Blessed Beauties raised up a community distinguished by a spirit of selfless service, devotion, and love of God. Drawing on the power of prayer, you have placed complete trust in God, and directing your energy to the service of others, you have overcome challenges through cooperation and mutual support. Indeed, we have witnessed that in times of adversity, you have demonstrated extraordinary resilience. Now, the disaster in itself and the disasters in themselves created in the Baha'is of Tanna a willingness and a desire to unite to solve the problem and to bring in their neighbors who are not Baha'is. So the disaster had its silver lining. Many of the things we should be dealing with are preparation, preparedness, and generosity. It's neither high-tech nor brain surgery. How did Joseph avert famine in Egypt after Pharaoh's dream? He set aside stores of wheat after the Pharaoh dreamt of the 7 thin cows eating the 7 fat cows. So how did the master avert famine in Palestine? By doing the same thing, growing a surplus, storing it sensibly, and being able to bring it out of storage once the hunger became in need of it. It's not high-tech, it's not brain surgery. It requires human willingness and human service. So more than anything, our reaction to disasters must be to be united. How? Pool the brains of humanity. Google these, Google Medsea and Dryad. They're developing automatic forest fire detection and snuffing out system. If we invest in these across the whole world's forests, the investment will be immense, but it will prevent forest fires getting serious. We need a united, thinking, loving, scientific community and a world. We need an international rules-based order. None of this modern rubbish about one nation before another nation. This is trying to go back to yesterday. We know that God has decided the earth will be united. Any attempt to fight it is just causing more trouble. Systems covering all states to alleviate the preventable disasters. This is why we have the UNO. And its functional arms, the World Health Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, United Nations Children's Fund. This is why we have an early warning system for weather in the WMO. This is why we have seed banks. That's why the US government has a Center for Disease Control, because you need a global perspective. Let your vision be world embracing rather than confined to your own selves. Universal education. If you want to wow yourself, just study how many Baha'i schools were established in Persia and open to all people in Persia in the 1920s. Something like 600. It was the clergy who prevented the, quote, faithful, unquote, from sending their children there. But whereas Persia in 1940 had a female literacy rate of 15%, among the Baha'is, it was 100%, because the Baha'is went to the Baha'i school, but very few of the Muslim children were allowed to go there by their own parents and their own priests. We need disaster recovery plans in provinces, towns, and companies. We need to vaccinate the whole world against something new that's coming. We don't need to worry if they can pay for it or not. In 1888, there were 800,000 polio cases. In 2024, there were 40,000 polio cases. There will always be things we can't foresee and we cannot avoid, and we must place our faith in God in all circumstances. We are never poor or deprived. We are merely temporarily disadvantaged. Even on a local basis, our communities can be helpful. Over the last week, we've had this great sinkhole appear in the town of Godstone, Surrey. It started off this big and it's grown and grown and grown along the street. It was probably because a water supply pipe had been leaking for years and washing away the soil, and it's getting worse and worse. Now, Surrey County Council has a resilience group consisting of lots of experts. Could not each LSA in a large territory, in a large city, set up such a thing with both specialists and generalists to help society, as has been done in Tana? We must never, as Baha'is, lose sight of the big picture. Sometimes the big picture is hard to spot at first. You have to search for it. And sometimes if you get too close to it, you can't see it. You need to step back and look at it. But the big picture is always there. Do not despair. Work steadily. Sincerity and love conquer hate. How many seemingly impossible events are coming to pass in these days? Let your hearts be filled with the strenuous desire that tranquility and harmony may encircle all this warring world. Thank you for listening if you have been. That's it.
Okay, applause there. Thank you so much. I think we have some questions for you. And one of the things that's been going on in the chat is a request for some of the websites, like the one YouTube. If you can go back to that slide, I'm just going to post it on the chat. And then I wrote the name of the two websites you just referred to, the last slide, and then we can open it up to questions if you don't mind.
Okay, hang on.
So thank you so much. First of all, we're going to give you a big round of applause because I think a lot of our heads are spinning with all the information that you have just put out there for us, and maybe a different perspective on looking at natural disasters. And it would be great to have people raise their hand and chime in. I will post that for everyone right now. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can see hands up. It goes in an order or such. See if I can find that. Do you have any hands up?
Okay, can I stop?
Actually, let me just I'm trying to copy and paste that and I can't see it. So I'm going to type it directly in. If you don't mind, if you could just leave it up there for a second, I will type it in for all of us. And does anyone like to unmute and give a comment?
My name is Tozi Nomvete. I am in Austell, Georgia, about 20 minutes outside of downtown Atlanta. I am so thrilled to enter this London deep. It's very deep, I can tell you that. I've enjoyed every session. I'm trying to get my relatives in South Africa. I was born in South Africa in 1950. And firstly, I was married to Dr. Tayyebe Sobhani Nomvete, who came from Sangsar in Iran. And then what happened was she had a mental condition that when I went to the LSA, they allowed me to just live away from her in the same city for 10 years. So whenever I saw them, I would take them home if they didn't have transport. In other words, practically, it's not a divorce. It's just that we can't be together. That's it. And so after 10 years, here I am working, getting an email from Auburn University, Montgomery, saying, is there a med school at your university? I said, yeah, sure. So they send this message to the nursing department in your university and tell them we would like to send a Fulbright scholar there. All they need to do is just to set up a home for that person. So I go to this Mrs. Kenjan, is her name. Ma'am, here is an email from Alabama. They want to send a professor who can help you change your curricula. And if you want, and all you have to do is just set up a home, find a home for this person, and they'll pay all the expenses. She would look at me. and say, oh, okay, I'll talk about it. I kept doing this 3 or 4 times. Then one day she looked at me and she said, Tozi, we are tired. That phrase brought me to America because I went back to the on email to Urban University Montgomery nursing department, and I said, oh, they are so busy. They are very, very busy, and they don't have time to come and to deal with this matter. Eventually, this lady said, well, why don't you come? Do you see how Baha'u'llah opens?
Yes,
This
yes,
is what I'm
yes.
telling you. Baha'u'llah opens the way for you. You may find difficulty in your life, but just be happy. Take it, as you go. A formal divorce was done, but that's my